my snow angels, this is Snow. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about this book again, Malui Nekong. If you have not seen my first video on this that I posted last week, please check it out. I will put it up at the end of this video. So yeah, please check that video out. Then this video will make a little bit more sense. I mean, if you don't, I think you'll still get a lot out of this, but yeah, I highly recommend it. Basically, I am starting to read this book in Korean for my Korean study, and as an added layer of difficulty, I'm annotating it, also in Korean. This is a process, but I am really enjoying it so far, and I really want to share with you guys what I've learned, as well as strategies for reading this kind of book, whether it's in English or Korean or any other language for that matter. These principles remain the same, especially for reading nonfiction, so that you can really best get out of it whatever you need to get out of it. Otherwise, it's just going to go into short-term memory and then delete itself. The first thing you need to do with this kind of book is something called surveying or previewing. What that means is you're getting a general sense and idea of what the book is about. You do that by reading the front cover, the back cover, about the author, or in this case, authors. And then you read every heading and subheading. Usually you can do that in the table of contents, or each organization of each section of a book or chapter. So I will get into that with the specific structure of this book as a way to demonstrate. First, I read the front cover and the back cover, which did give information about like an overview of what the book is about, as well as saying it's going to be using different ideas from different philosophers, both Western and Eastern. And then what I learned about the authors is their educational backgrounds, as well as what got them into the study of words. And what I found interesting was one of the authors is actually a high school teacher. I found that interesting because I'm currently an English teacher in Korea, so I thought that was cool. Yeah, so then I went over to the table of content, which looks like that. This book is organized into stages. There are 8 of them. I just read the stage and the stage title, and then the main title of the whole thing. And then there's subsections that are kind of like chapters, so I just call them chapters, so that I could get a general idea of what each stage was about before I start reading the book. Also, a thing that I started doing is, since this is in Korean and I do not speak Korean fluently, I'm just actively studying it and have been doing so for the past 3 years. I do recognize some words, but most words I don't. So what I'm doing is, if I'm seeing a word a lot, but I don't know what it means, I will circle it and I will look up what it means and then write down what it means in pencil. The reason why I'm doing it in pencil is because eventually I will get to the point where I know the word and what it means just by memory, and so then I can erase it. That way I am not overcrowding the book with notes, because I'm also annotating. The first word I ran into, I did it in pen because I didn't think to do it in pencil until later, but it's this stage 2, which says Gwanjam. Sorry if I butchered the pronunciation, it's hard. What I noticed was that the main title of this is Gwanjam Bakugi. And I knew that Bakugi means change. So I wanted to know what Gwanjam is, because I wanted to know what I'm supposed to be changing. And so I was like, oh, change of perspective, that makes sense. So I read what each stage is about and what the mini chapters are about, and then each chapter is like 2 pages long, maybe, give or take. Here are a couple other things I want to mention before I talk about the first stage more in depth. That is other strategies to use. I annotate. So what that means is like if you read a sentence, and I am going these sentences, by the way. If there's a little bit of inaccuracy, I can usually catch it because I know enough Korean to be able to understand what they're trying to say. But yeah, what I do is if there is a sentence that I really, really like, then I underline it. And then I write a note on the side. So it can really be anything. It can be something like, oh, I really like this. I didn't think about it in this way. Or it can be, oh, I've had an experience with this. Or it can be like an additional insight from your own perspective. That's what I've been doing with each chapter. And then another thing to do is to summarize. So you can either summarize verbally or write it down. In this case, I'm doing both. I wrote a basic summary on this page, which I'm going to be using that as a basis for this. And I'm summarizing out loud to the internet for whoever wants to hear. That's because it's a repetition. If you can like come up with these like bite-sized summaries that can be a sentence long, then it's going to stay into long-term memory. The more you repeat it, the more you will remember it. That being said, I'm going to jump into the first stage, and it looks like this. Each stage looks similar. And the main title is How to Fill a Word Bowl. Like the main metaphor is with language, it is like you are filling a bowl with water. The water is like the words. What kind of words are you filling it? And what kind of bowl do you have, I guess, to complete the metaphor? So then there's this kind of spread, which is kind of like a summary of what it's about. So I'm going to go like chapter by chapter and just tell you what my summaries are. I'm not going to read excerpts from the book because my Korean pronunciation is really bad. But just know that I make annotations. Like you can see down at the bottom. I put this whole paragraph in a box because I really liked it. It's just like what it generally looks like for me. So, but I'm like not going to show you guys like everything because we'll be here forever. I don't want to bore you. So I'm just going to tell you guys what my summaries are for each section. Chapter 1, the main title is When the Bowl is Served, Water is Served. What I figured out is there's a quote at the beginning of each chapter from a different philosopher, and then at the bottom of the page it talks about this person's background and like when they lived, kind of thing. And then the whole chapter is centered around this philosopher's teachings, like with the author's own spin and deep dive. Okay, so this chapter basically says that your words will show what kind of person you are. For example, if you are a deep person, then you will have deeper language. If you're an ignorant person, you're going to have more ignorant language. If you're more pragmatic, it's going to be more pragmatic, that kind of thing. And the first thing you need to do is to develop yourself, develop your own self-esteem. I think what the author is trying to say is that's the bowl. You need to have a good vessel to fill with language. And in order to have that, you need to build yourself first. And then I kind of like made like a little equation that made sense to me based off of what this chapter was about, and that is self-esteem plus self-control equals better language. And then this stage, the first few chapters is about building self-esteem, and then the last is about building self-control. Just an FYI. The second chapter is called Don't Think of Good or Evil. So what does that mean? It's about what society says is good or evil. And what this chapter is saying is that you need to abandon those. Why? Why is that? Well, societal norms and societal constructs, as most of you know, change. We see what has worked and what doesn't, and we've had to abandon them. We've seen where they have been harmful. For example, past ideas about racial identity and sexuality and gender identity and gender norms and gender stereotypes are all very, very harmful. Yeah, stuff like conversion therapy for LGBTQ. Yeah, the shame basings and racism, like those are things that we need to abandon. We need to treat everyone with respect. And then, yeah, things like, if you're a little boy, you can't play with Barbie dolls. Things like that. Like, we need to abandon social norms. And then what you think of yourself matters more than what the world thinks of you. Chapter 3. The title says, I'm always the main character. There were a lot of really interesting things in this chapter. I was like, oh, I didn't really think of it in that way. The main thing is your intentions behind the things you do and the things you say. You need to change your perspective and ask yourself if you're doing things because you want to or if you're doing it for attention. The biggest thing that was brought up in this chapter is people we consider to be selfish or self-centered are actually doing things for worldly recognition. So like for clout. We've seen like a lot of people like on the internet do really stupid shit for clout. And like we view them as selfish and self-centered, materialistic. They're still thinking of other people. They're thinking about what other people think of them. They're not living as the main character. It takes courage to live as a main character because not many people in society are actually living that way. My added insight is it takes courage to be me because no one else can be me. I need to be me and embrace that. I really like this chapter. It's really cool. Chapter 4. Each person is a work of art. So I do have an art background. I do have an art degree. I like the sentiment. Basically, it's like you have to treat yourself and treat other people as if we're all a work of art. And that needs to start from childhood. So there might be like a lot of you that have a lot of childhood trauma because of how you were treated by adults and how that affected your self-esteem and has made things harder in life, and then you end up having to go to therapy. As adults, we need to treat children like they are a work of art. And that will help them grow up well and have good self-esteem and to be good citizens. If society learns to see each other in this way, people will learn to love and accept their differences. So like I mentioned before, with racism and gender identity and sexuality, if we learn to see people who are different than us, who look different, who love differently than we do, we need to learn to see them as a work of art. And that way we can learn to love and accept their differences. That's super important. Chapter 5. Love yourself more than the world. So basically, it says that you need to become a creator unrestricted by the limits that society places on you. And then this is something I've been developing for the past 5 years, is you need to love yourself first before you can love other people. Now, I'm not saying like it's completely impossible. You do need both. You do need love from yourself and you do need love from other people. If you love yourself, you will love other people more, and other people, the right kind of people, will help you love yourself more. Yeah, it is not a binary thing, and it is not an isolated thing. And it's something that spreads. But it does need to start with yourself in order to love other people better, I guess. So I mentioned before that there's self-esteem and then there's self-control, and that half of the first stage is about self-control. Yeah. That's chapter 6. Which is don't obey your emotions. So it's basically says that if you don't learn to understand your emotions, you become a slave to them. So whether that's anger, jealousy, sadness, I guess. You can be consumed by these emotions, and that will affect what you say to other people and how you treat them. And that leads to a lot of pain and a lot of regret and a lot of harm. So yeah, this is where self-mastery comes, and learning to understand your emotions, understand why you're acting that way. Because if you learn to recognize what you're feeling, then you can learn how to release them in a healthy way that does not hurt other people and affect your language. Which brings us to the last chapter of this stage, which is you have to observe in order to find out your emotions. The goal is to develop good feelings and emotions and to reduce negative ones. So you do this by practicing mindfulness or observing your reactions as they are. So I used to do a lot of yoga, and then sometimes I meditate. I'm not very good at meditating because it's really hard for me to sit still and my mind wanders a lot. So yeah, it's a little hard for me, but I learned about this meditation and yoga, and even in therapy. Practicing mindfulness means that you're acknowledging your emotions and your thoughts as they come in kind of like a more objective way. You're like sitting back and just recognizing that they exist, and then you just let them fade away. Which the philosopher in this chapter is, I think, either a really prominent Buddhist or Buddha. I'm not quite sure. I don't remember. Yeah, so it says you can learn to control your emotions if you're able to observe them. So if you don't observe them, you can't control them. This idea I thought was very interesting because I actually experienced this, and I've actually learned to recognize this. I just didn't realize it until I read this chapter. But when you are feeling certain emotions, you're going to have different reactions from your body. And I've noticed this when I am angry. When I'm angry, I actually recognize that I have anxiety symptoms. So I will tend to get a migraine. My mind starts racing. I feel like my blood's boiling, and I have shortness of breath. So I hate being angry because I suddenly get very anxious. And when this happens, I will usually take a step back. I'll go outside and expel the emotions. To sum up, in order to build a foundation, you need to build self-esteem. In order to build good vocabulary, you need to have control over your emotions. So yeah, that's it for this week. I'm going to be doing this probably every week. I'm going to summarize each stage for you guys. Yeah, if you're interested in this, please stay tuned for the other videos, and please watch the first one for more context. I hope you found some tips in here that are useful, not only for reading books in another language, but also reading nonfiction books in general. I feel like these tips are universal. Yeah, even if you're reading in English and you see a word you don't know the meaning of, you can just look it up in the dictionary, and you can write it in pencil on the side. So even that. So yeah, I hope you find this to be helpful. And yeah, if you have not subscribed, please subscribe. Become a snow angel today. Don't be a snow devil. Don't forget to like and comment. And I will see you in the next video. Bye!